So, as a bit of background, 2 billion people, more than 61% of the world's employed population, make their living in the informal economy, according to the ILO. The informal economy is one of the greatest economic development challenges, particularly facing the African continent. The informal economy, according to the ILO, is defined as the economic activities of workers and economic units that are not covered in law or practice or insufficiently covered by formal arrangements. 85.8% of jobs in Africa are currently in the informal sector. The challenge, of course, for policymakers is to create an environment where the formal sector can thrive while creating opportunities for people working in the informal sector to maintain and improve a good standard of living. The coronavirus, of course, and the pandemic have taken a heavy toll on all economies, but most importantly, those that depend on an informal sector. Informal workers, firms that are not registered, of course, with the government, have most of the time had no access to government support or benefits during this period. So today's conference, we would like to aim to discuss innovative approaches to tackle informality in Africa and to make recommendations to governments and the private sector. Since mid-March 2020, IOE has organized several high-level digital conferences with our colleagues at the Konrad Adenauer Stiftung, with UN leaders, with CEOs, renowned experts in all aspects linked to the pandemic and the world of work. Our conference aims to inform and mobilize the global network, facilitate peer learning, and exchange experiences and ideas as catalysts for defining the way forward. We will be producing a report based on the dialogue today. And so we really want you to give us as many innovative ideas coming from your different perspectives. So now I'm going to call on to Matthias Storns, who is the Deputy Secretary General of IOE, to give some opening remarks. Matthias, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Shay, and greetings from Geneva. Shay has already elaborated on the numbers and the big development challenge which informality is, and that is the reason why it's such an important topic for the IOE and for the Konrad Adenauer Foundation. The IOE, the International Organization of Employers, is the global umbrella organization of business. We represent more than 50 million companies through our national member federations in more than 150 countries. Informality is not an abstract term. Informality means for workers no access to social protection, no access to any kind of security. Often it means decent work deficits. For business, it means no access to capital, no access to any kind of support structures, no access to any kind of training and support. And for governments, it means loss of revenues. They are not able to do their job because they don't have the taxes coming in, the money and the funding coming in. A key issue in order to tackle informality is an enabling business environment. If you need to wait for, I'm sorry for this noise, if you need to wait for a year for your business license, you won't do, you will go informal. If you need to pay high bribes in order to get your business license, you won't do it, you will go informal. If you need to have a lot of red tape in order to do your business, you won't do it, you go informal. So it is about the business environment, and it is of critical importance in order to tackle that for governments to work together with employers' federation. They bring the voice of the business and they know best where are the problems and how to solve them. One key issue is the low productivity within informal economies. Productivity is not an aim in itself. Productivity is about everything. It's about having the funding in order to grow the business. It's about employing people. Productivity means having the means to invest in people, giving them a decent salary. And we need to find ways how to increase productivity also for companies who are on the verge between informality and formality, because that might be the stepping stone they need in order to get into formality. We need to break the vicious cycle, because it is clear governments who don't have the tax revenues can't provide the services, but because they can't provide the services and they don't have a good public service, they are then in order increase again informality. So we need to think how to break through, and that is the aim of this conference. This is what we now want to learn today in this exchange. How do we break this vicious cycle? How do we get companies from the informal to the formal sector? How we make sure that informal companies can take the decisive steps to go into formality. Thank you so much for Konrad Adenauer Foundation to support this important work. Thank you so much for Andrea for a personal commitment on that. And I'm really looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Matthias. And now I'd like to give the floor to Andrea, our co-organizer this morning from the Konrad Adenauer Stiftung. Andrea is the executive director of the New York office of what we call CAS. Andrea, you have the floor.
Thank you, Shea. Ladies and gentlemen, dear panelists, it is a pleasure for me to welcome you today to this dialogue on factors influencing the transition from the informal to the formal economy. And having worked for over 10 years myself in African countries, I'm aware of the complexity of informal economies and also the multiple factors and parameters which are impeding, or I would even say counteracting, the efforts of formalization. And we are certainly not addressing a new topic today, but the socioeconomic impact of the pandemic has highlighted the vulnerabilities of a sector of which large segments of societies in developing countries are depending on for their survival, be it as employers or even as the kind of beneficiaries of these kind of informal service providers. When countries restricted entry during the pandemic, informal traders used to cross national borders in order to purchase their merchandise. They were cut off from their supplies from one day to the other. Also, day laborer earning their living in the informal sector lost their jobs in large-scale lockdowns without any social protection system in place or any means for compensation. However, it has already been before the pandemic that the challenges of growing informal economies became apparent. Demographic developments, weak education sectors, or education not aligned with the needs of the labor market all have forced a large segment of the labor force into informality. And in many instances, these are young people who not only experience a rough start, but are also locked out of many other aspects of life because of a lack of decent work. So the root causes and challenges of the problem are known, while also at the same time, initiatives are taken by donors or governments in order to address it. However, we still have to say results remain feeble. Even the advantages of new technologies did not stimulate the transition to formality as expected. Governments have a comprehensive toolbox at their disposal, ranging from financial subsidies, modifications to the tax systems or initial tax burden, incentives such as inclusion into social protection systems, access to public tenders and service contracts, as well as administrative reforms to cut the red tape that just Matthias mentioned, the red tape in which emerging entrepreneurs can find themselves entangled right from the start. So we know the situation and we have the potential incentives, but we also see that informal economies persist. And it is exactly in this context that we want to take up the topic today and discuss in such a kind of a multi-stakeholder approach what else might be needed and how different actors, be it government, multilateral or commercial banks, and business associations could work better together in order to facilitate a transition. And I think we have an excellent panel for addressing the topic today, and my special thanks go to our panelists, but particularly also to Amadou Seko, the special advisor for Africa at IOE, for pulling this event together. But I equally would like to thank Shea Gopal, IOE representative to the UN in New York, and Matthias Thorns, Deputy Secretary General, for constantly also nurturing our cooperation along its way. And I wish all of us an interesting discussion. And now over to you, Shea, for the further moderation.
Thank you so much, Andrea, and thank you for thanking everyone. A person who's not on the line, Amadou Sakho, has been absolutely instrumental in bringing all of us together. But as you might know, he is attending a meeting in Abidjan right now. Okay, I need to check because if I understand correctly, and I'm not sure he's on the line, our colleague from the Nigerian Employers Federation, Mr. Vel Smat Ayende, are you on the line? Now going to introduce our first speaker, Mrs. Emma Ofori Agyengmeng. We're delighted to have you with us today. She's the Director of Policy Planning, Monitoring, and Evaluation at the Ministry of Employment and Labor Relations. Like many African countries, employment in Ghana is predominantly informal. However, Ghana is renowned for the hard work it's been doing for many decades now to reduce its informal sector. Mrs. Amende Ofori, Director, as I said, at the Ministry of Employment, is with us today, and we're delighted to have her and her expertise. Mrs. Ofori, some businesses in the informal sector may place a very high value on income earned today, regardless of the size of the gains that could be realized a month from today. For these businesses, the scale of investment needed to facilitate formalization may not be reasonable. How can policies be designed to target and adapt to the discounting and immediate needs of businesses? So I'm delighted to give you the floor.
Thank you very much, Shay, for this pleasant opportunity to be on this platform. And thank you, Andreas, and also Matthias, for that warm introduction. And if I understand clearly, the synopsis I got from our employers and social partners wants us to at least share the Ghanaian experience, what has gone on so far, and what lessons, the private sector needs, or even government collaboratively need to improve our transition from informality to formality. So if you permit me, Shay, I would want to share my screen so that you can at least move with me whilst I present. Is that okay with you?
That's fine, thank you.
Okay. But like I said, if I understood the synopsis very well, it's only to share some experiences of Ghana's efforts towards our formalization process.
Yes, that's correct. We wanted you to share some of the experiences, particularly as Ghana is such a very good example of how you've been able to tackle some of the challenges of the informal sector.
She has been connected.
Okay, so I think what we will do is, I see Mr. Vel Smat is there from the Nigerian Employers Federation, and I believe you need to leave to go to another meeting. So we would like to put you, if that's okay, ahead of the other speakers to give your presentation. So if that's okay with everyone.
That is fine.
Okay, thank you. So though employers organizations are primarily representatives of mainstream formal economy enterprises, their role often directly intersects with the informal economy. Mr. Vel Smat is the Deputy Director and Head of Member Services at the Nigerian Employers Association. So we'd like to ask you, Mr. Vel, what type of support could employers' federations offer to facilitate the transition of informal enterprises to the formal sector? You have the floor.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to be part of this conversation. And that conversation is quite germane within the context of what we do, what we also plan to do in the days ahead. So without taking much of your time, I think I said I work with NECA, and we're a business membership organization. We are the umbrella body of employers in Nigeria and Situa, and we represent over 4,000 direct and indirect formal employers within the context of the organized private sector of Nigeria. So can I just move to the next slide then, so that I can have more time to converse on the issues at hand. This is what we do. We promote, safeguard, and defend the interests of businesses through all legal and legitimate means, and we represent enterprises in their relationship with all tiers of government, whichever level that they have. The next slide, please. So the question is, what type of support can we, Employers Federation like ours, give to facilitate transition of informal enterprises to formal sector? I would say first that the strength of any Employers Federation depends partly or to a large extent on its size and the strength of its membership. And since we're a membership organization, we leverage or we pride ourselves based on the size and also the strength of our members. So playing a significant role in the formalization of those in the formal sector is quite important to us. In fact, it is enlightened self-interest that we make deliberate and concise efforts to help those in the formal sector to come back to the formal sector, because they are all potential members of the Employers Federation. Once they are formalized, once they are settled, and once they come to the mainstream of business operations within the context of formality, they're all potential members of a business membership organization like us. And in Nigeria, where you have about 65–70% of the informal sector playing a major role within the context of national development, then it becomes very important for us to give attention to the sector. So what can we do to help them to transit to formality? Quite a bit of those things that we can do. And those are part of the things we have started doing in NECA, and those are part of the things that we plan to deepen, which I will also share some practices. So within the context of formality, a key end of formality is being registered. Being registered as a business, being registered to operate within the context of the legal framework that they have set for itself, being positioned in such a way that you can benefit from opportunities that exist within the context of the formal sector. Well, the informal sector also provides these opportunities because most of those operators can hide under the cover of what they do. They can live without being exposed to the taxman. They can live without being exposed directly to regulatory agencies. So that provides another form of attraction for them, and which necessitates many of them not considering the plan to transit to formality. But from what we can do and what we have been doing, and one of the ways we can assist is actually to organize them into sectoral groups. Of recent, we tried we have worked with the Ministry of Labor in Nigeria to actually organize the miners group. There's a wide range of miners that are operating within the informal sector. So one of the things we did was to organize the miners, organize the cocoa farmers. Those are two critical sectors that we are currently working to formalize by getting them to first register their businesses within the context of Corporate Affairs Commission, and then also getting them to register at the Ministry of Labor as a sectoral employers federation. So one of the things we can help them to do to help them to transit is actually to organize them, bring them to the mainstream of employers. That will open up the group dynamics to them, help them to leverage on collaboration, help them to leverage on the technical capacity that organizations like us provides and that we have, and also help them to be exposed to international corporations and also international linkages. So that is one of the things that Employers Federation can do to actually organize them so that they can benefit from the group dynamics. The second thing you can do, and which is quite fundamental, is capacity building. For most of those informal sector operators, they are hardly organized. And for you to come to the mainstream of organized businesses, where you can leverage on the opportunity of grants, where you can leverage on international technical opportunities, where you can leverage on opportunities that also exist within or that are inherent within the Employers Federation itself. I think capacity building is one of those very important things that an EO can do to help them to transit. Most of them are not organized. Their processes are not organized. Their business improvement strategies is not well defined. And fortunately, we are exposed to the ILO Start and Improve Your Business modules and other entrepreneurship modules that we currently use to assist those in the informal sector to get organized, tidy up their accounting processes, tidy up their human resources processes, and also help them with knowledge that can help them to write their own business plans. The moment they can write their own business plan, the moment they have a formalized accounting process that tracks their expenses and also tracks their expenditure, then we have positioned them to move gradually within the context of becoming formalized. So capacity building is also a major intervention that an Employers Federation like us can provide. And we have consistently been providing this, and also we are achieving some milestones within this context. The third part of it is advocacy and facilitating special concessions for government. Most of those in the informal sector, part of their challenges is having to operate and compete within the context of a very volatile environment. They are exposed to local government atrocities, exposed to so many challenges, legal and illegal taxes, also levies or at different level of the government, both local government, state government, and also at the federal level. One of the things we can also do is to leverage on our strength in advocacy and actually speak to government to facilitate special concessions for this set of businesses. If they come to the mainstream of organized businesses, there is a big chance that they will be captured within the tax net. Government will make more revenue. The informal sector group will become more formalized, and it becomes a win-win situation for everybody. We have done it before in some states, and we are also poised to continue to deepen our engagement in that area. Advocate for special concessions for this set of operators so that they pay reduced levies, they pay reduced taxes, we get special concessions for them so that they can formalize their business, even get tax concessions for them so that within a space of time, they can formalize their businesses. Once they transit to the formality, give them some space of time to stabilize, then government can start leveraging on the tax that they will be paying, while they also leverage on the opportunities that government will provide. Can I move to the next slide, please? Now, with over 4,000 employers, both multinationals, big organizations, medium-scale organizations, there is a massive opportunity for informal sector operators to benefit from the value chain. One of the attractions and one of the things EOs can do is to actually help these informal sector operators, once they are registered and once in the process of transiting, provide linkages for them within the context of the big organizations, within the context of the multinational organizations, within the context of the medium-scale organizations, fix them in the value chain so that their businesses can benefit. If they want to do supplies, the big organizations will need supplies, the big organizations will need vendors, fix them in, provide an opportunity where they can fit into the business value chain of the big organizations. That way their businesses grow, that way they become much more organized, and gradually they become big players also within the context of the formal economy. Providing linkages for them will significantly be attractive to them and also get them out of the the benefit, the perceived benefits that they think they are getting from the informal, from being an informal sector operator. And lastly, is protect and defend them against exploitation by advocating and deepening social dialogue with government for special protection frameworks for them. And one of the challenges we face in our country is regulatory challenges. Levies, taxes at different levels that tends to stifle even big organizations. Even big organizations struggle within the context of that regulatory consistencies. And if government can give special protection, we can advocate for that. We can make a case for this set of businesses. Because if you remember in one of my slides, I say about 65% of Nigeria's GDP basically is driven by the informal sector. So if you look at 65 to 70%, it's quite massive. So it won't be a hard sell for EOs like us to advocate for special protections for this set of businesses so that progressively we allow them to grow and progressively we allow them to transit without many hiccups into the formal sector. It has been done before, it can still be done. One of the experiences we have is creation of hubs, business hubs, or incubation centers, as we call them in Nigeria. Incubation centers where these businesses can go transact their businesses. Incubation centers where you have some level of consistency in power supply, you have some level of consistency in infrastructure, so that those of them that doesn't have infrastructures to run their businesses can actually go to the incubation center. Incubation, as the word connotes, go to the incubation center, do their businesses, use the infrastructure in the incubation center. So as they grow, then they win themselves away from the incubation center so that they can have their own premises and have their own businesses to run. So this is 5 amongst many other things that we believe that Employers Federation like us can do, and it will help to fast track the transition of the informal sector operators into proper formality, not only for the benefit of the Employers Federation, because once they grow, they become our members, they pay subscription, it strengthens our hand within the context of, yes, we are a representative member organization, and also helps government to deepen its capacity to generate income within the context of collection of tax. And it also solves so many social issues that many countries are facing: insecurity, crime. I think with many people engaged productively and also operating within the context of the formal economy, then there are chances that as these businesses expand, as they grow, they will grow to employ more persons, thereby solving the issues of unemployment. They will grow also within the context of helping the government to generate income, which I've mentioned earlier. So it's an enlightened self-interest for us as an EU, employers organization, to actually pay more attention to helping informal sector operators to transit to formality. So that will be my submission. I would just wish to take questions or take comments if there are any.
Thank you so much. That was so much information to digest. But as you said, and rightly so, Andrea, in her introduction, we are so many different groups that we all need to come together, and it has to be a multi-stakeholder dialogue. And the Employers Federation are so critical in representing so many different sectors, as you said, but also from registration to advocacy to the whole area of tax is so critical for businesses to assist them in moving from the informal sector to the formal sector. So thank you very much for that. And now we'd like to go back to, if I believe Emma is on the line, and to hear the government perspective, and particularly from Ghana. Emma, are you now on the line, and are you able to present?
You can hear me clearly, right?
Yes,
okay.
We can hear you and we see your presentation. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Elodie for trying to share the screen. Yes, like I was saying, the Ghana experience is no different, sincerely, and our efforts towards formalization has been one of a very checkered one. I will begin with some, so please, can you move to the next slide? That's what I'm thinking. Hello? Hello, can you hear me now? Oh my God, I don't know why I'm having these challenges
We can hear you,
today.
Emma, no worries. We hear you and we see the slide up outline of the presentation.
Okay, that's great. That's great. Thank you so much. So I will begin with some context, then we share some data and statistics of how far we've come. Then we talk about the interventions and the role that we think employer organizations must, forgetting the barriers of formalization, and most importantly, our approach. So as by way of context, we have had lots of names for this informal economy we have. And hydra-headed as it may be, some call it the shadow, the hidden, the underground, the invisible, and all sorts of names that may not be too good for the transition process because they connote very unreasonable and unpleasant thoughts. But simply put, no matter how highly unregulated they are, we know that they are also producing legal goods and services. You know, they may be unregulated, but they are the group that is also producing some legal goods and services in you know, for the nation. In fact, our Ghana Statistical Service defines them as, you know, those sectors that are not, do not have some formal accounts. But I think that we think the problem goes beyond that. I want to describe to you what we're actually talking about. For example, employment in the informal economy, and please go to the next slide. Informal economy is made up of all employment in the informal sector or the sectors. And I think what you're seeing now depicts what I'm saying. All employment in the informal sector, plus informal sector jobs that are also outside the informal sector. And thereby we are talking about the informal jobs in the formal sector and also the informal jobs in households. So pictorially, that is the size of employment we're talking about and the people in there. Please, can you go to the next slide? So for us, no matter how unregulated they are, we are just using two parameters here to make it look like exactly what we're describing as in Ghana as we see it. We are talking of unregistered and also they do not have a fixed location. At least for the purposes of this presentation, this is how I can mimic it for everybody to really understand. So in the scheme of things, we are looking at how or the degree to which they are registered or unregistered, and the degree to which they are fixed or, you know, not fixed in terms of location. So we have one group, all in the informal economy, that are called the smartest. The smartest, for example, the statistics, for example, I'll share some of them shortly. They represent close to 5%, sort of. They have some fixed location. At least you can identify them, but they are unregistered. That is that group we're talking about. We also have those that they have fixed location and they are registered. These are the groups that are almost formal. In fact, they represent private formal. They have some semblance of formality, and we'll get to that space shortly. Then we have the highly informal, these ones are not they are not registered at all, and you cannot also find them without any location. Then the last are the darkest. The darkest are quick to go underground. They are registered, but they have no fixed location. So just when they see regulation or any existence, they just go underground. And recently with IT, we have seen lots of such that operate from their car booths, you know, having wares to sell from, you know, very obscure sources that you may not even be, you may not even want to talk about or think about. But in all that, I can say that there is a continuum of these moving up and down. You cannot have them as in straight jackets as I have presented. There is the degree of either the registration or the location we are only looking at. And for the purposes of this presentation, some of their characteristics also cut across. The next slide, please. Let me share some data with you from Ghana, and indeed from as far back as 1984, right up to now, 2021, we have had the informal sector statistics, not a very pleasant one. You know, it's from very high to, well, reasonably high now, currently as we speak. And maybe the magic we did is the reason why we're on this platform, to be able to juxtapose some of our actions to the results we see. Right from 1984 till now, it has hovered between, you know, 85, 90, and currently we can be proud of, say, 77% of the population as being in the informal economy, and that's quite huge. In 2017, for example, I mean, looking at some of the parameters within which you're working, the informal sector accounted for, say, 26.6% of GDP, and that represents the city equivalent of about $18.3 billion US. So you can guesstimate how high that was, and currently our city is, I think, 1 to 7. So you actually know what it is. Then yet again, that same 2017, we were able to register, and I'm still using the registration parameters to make it clearer. We still only 1.2 million persons that were registered as taxpayers. But in 2021, that's last year's statistics, we got a little improvement in the, let's say by 2, a little over 2.3 million people being registered as taxpayers. And even though that represents less than 10% of the total population, we think the quantum leap must be explained. And that is what we posited very well in some of the interventions we have put it. So currently the size of the informal economy we have, unlike Nigeria, is around 7.6%, which is the 77% we talked about. And when you look at the figures in there was just a little over 72,000 people that are now registered or have been, you know, registered as taxpayers. So that represents around just a small percentage, 0.9% of what has gone on. What accounts for that small difference? No matter how small it is, it still must be interrogated as it looks like. These are some of the policies we have put in place. I mean, we have called for a national identification program that is linking the card, an identification card, to a tax ID, to SNP numbers, to SIN registration, and a whole lot of other documents that we're using to be able to identify people in a way so that, you know, it helps the process. We have also tried to go very well with street naming. Indeed, Nigeria is far better than us when it comes to street naming. It's something we look forward to, exactly, and it's working perfectly well now, at least. We have also, you know, done the National Digitization Property Addressing System via the Ghana Post GPS. On the On some other fronts, for the governance, on the governance front, we have tried to introduce some e-processes into good governance structures. So, for example, we're looking at e-cabinet and the civil service having an a total e-governance structures of limiting even some of the human interventions that we do here, trying to at least digitize some of the processes we have by that e-governance process. We also have e-business registration that has really reduced people commuting to and from other places to even access certain services that are peculiar to the informal sector. Our passport services have been also, streamlined. Vehicle registration, land registration. We even have now what our own Vice President is leading, a paperless port system where it also has its own challenges. But so in all that, I mean, these are just some. Go to the next slide, please. So we have largely also tried to engage, and on that front, please go to the next slide. We have tried to also done some incentivization, to incentivize, to support, and to regulate, because we know without these things, it will be very difficult to get them, registered and also to see them in some fiscal locations. But clearly, there have been some barriers to formalization, and indeed, this is where we think is the real current needs of the private sector. There are policy and regulatory barriers where we know some. There are some clashes in policy, in various policy. Bureaucracy, like you also talked about, is really becoming a problem as an administrative challenge. Fees and financial requirements also differ. There are no segregations where the weaker ones or even the largely formal ones can graduate to formality. So all these, some of these I've shown on the slides, put the matter in perspective. So
Emma,
we have some consequences regarding the.
Emma, sorry to interrupt you. I'm terribly sorry, but we have several other speakers, and I was just wondering if you could summarize a bit.
Yes, I'm almost at the end. I'm almost at the end. I just wanted you to see some of the challenges we have had over time. So in Ghana, our approach has been very simple. We are saying that we only need to look at that by using some pillars. And the pillar of identification, location, please go to the next slide so that you see that very clearly. We are using as an approach and to identify each and every person, to try and locate them as much as possible, and digitize all processes, and also a financial, to include them financially. So we have had regulations and policies to support all these 4 areas, and at the same time, using some principles, which is what I mentioned, to incentivize, to support, to do all that. And this has really changed the narrative. So if you ask me, by way of ending, how can some policies be designed to target and adopt, some of these discounting things? Reform the policy and regulatory environment to be able to streamline some of these registration processes, simplify administrative processes, because it's business we are looking at. We are not looking at laws. Then simplify also the fees by, segregating them to groups as per the strength of these institutions and all that. Should always continue to create the platform to drive home what the leverages are, and also to deepen awareness together with governments, to be able to understand some of the nuances and support government policies that are going on. Currently, we have this idea. We are implementing these things, but I bet you cannot find any document that is speaking to all these. We have tried to put it together as a sector that is interested in the formalization process, but you cannot have it as a document that you can see to even monitor progress and all that. So where we are now is what I've tried to summarize. We need to review the roadmap to be able to align to emerging issues. We also need to harmonize and transform, the roadmap we have to be, to have also a strategic document that is paying attention to all these areas we've spoken about. Then we validate the document so that we'll be able to share it and use it for a lot of advocacy so that the average employer or even organization forms like yours could benefit from what we are doing as a country. So thank you very much, Chair, for that. And I sincerely apologize for the mix-up before. It's a technological challenge. Thank you.
No problem. No problem. Thank you so much, Emma. That was so rich. The dialogue is fabulous. So much information. But you're right. You're absolutely right. We do need to document and share some of this information. And so we will be sharing both the video and the presentations widely within our network. So it's not lost here. So thank you so much, and sorry to rush you a bit. But as you said, there are still quite a few challenges, and the numbers, while they're improving, are still at 77.1%. You still have your work fit for you. So we get to hear the government perspective. Now, I know that there are many of you that are on the line, and I don't see any questions. Does anyone at this moment have any questions? Because I know some of our speakers need to leave. So I don't see any questions, but would anyone like to raise their hand, and would you like to ask any questions, particularly as Mr. Veilsmat has to leave? Don't see any, and I don't hear any, but I know that people are very interested in this topic. And so we will continue with the dialogue and share this information. So if you need to leave, thank you very much for your intervention.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. And I now would like to give the floor to our colleague at the World Bank, Mr. Mark Andrew Dutz. So he is the lead economist following the lead economist in Africa Chief Economist Office, and he is working for the World Bank. And he has several slides and a presentation to give. So Mark, I'd like to give you the floor now.
Thanks. It says I can't share the screen while other participant is sharing.
I believe that
okay, now it should be okay.
Has your slides, so it should be fine.
Yep. Full screen. Okay, so I'd like to thank the organizers for reaching out and including the World Bank, and in particular the Office of the Chief Economist of the Africa region, for participating in this important topic. What I'd like to put on the table for consideration is suggested findings based on a multi-year research program that we will soon be concluding the initial phases through the launch of a flagship publication, which will be entitled Technological Transformation for Jobs in Africa. And the idea really is to put a spotlight and emphasize technological upgrading as a key driver of higher productivity, higher sales, and more jobs through the higher productions that the productivity enables. So aligned with that work, we have done some work on the role of informal enterprises. And let me show you a little bit. This is actually somewhat not the most recent data, 2016 data, but it's largely representative, we understand, of the situation still in Africa. So if you take into account, as was presented earlier, households, as well as informal jobs in the formal sector, and in particular, the biggest part, of course, is the informal sector, including agriculture. You see that in Central Africa, in Eastern Africa, and in Western Africa, over 90% of people, largely poorer people and less skilled people, are informal. And combining these data with poverty data, who are poor people and where are they? Over 80% of Africa's poor people are rural, earning their living in non-wage informal enterprises, primarily farming and off-farm agriculture-related activities. So the challenge, the job challenge in Sub-Saharan Africa is overwhelmingly, if the challenge is to create more and better jobs, it's really to help those people in the informal sector boost their productivity, because it's only through increases in productivity that these firms will be able to have higher earnings. And so our sort of position, or what we'd like to propose as a serious policy direction is to focus policies much more on boosting the productivity of the informal enterprises, and have the concern of formalization come later. That those informal enterprises that are willing and able to boost their productivity and grow, they'll formalize over time, as long as the benefits of formalization are sufficiently high. And so the policy concern should be much less on getting the informal to formalize and much, much more on boosting the productivity of informal enterprises. Now, conventional approaches, so the World Bank group, IFC, together with different groups within the World Bank, did a detailed knowledge work over the past couple of years on the informal sector. And here are sort of the main conclusions. One, that the interventions focused on what they call the shallow determinants of informality, namely providing information or awareness about formalization processes and reducing the costs of formalization through some kinds of reduced taxes or reduced costs of formalization, really have not been effective. There's still over 90% of people are informal in their work. So the only area that's been somewhat more effective is enhanced enforcement. But there, some findings show that enhanced enforcement can actually harm poor people. And then there's we've heard corruption being a problem, and micro entrepreneurs have reported that formalization at times increases their exposure to corrupt enforcement. So that has to do with the shallow determinants. The deeper determinant of informality, and probably the most important one, is low productivity, low enterprise productivity, and low worker productivity. So addressing that deep determinant seems to be worth much more business and government policy focus. Of course, as those willing and able informal enterprises become more productive, and thereby grow in markets and are able to create more jobs, they will formalize, and then there will be opportunities for more wage employment. But currently there just isn't very much opportunity for wage employment, so people remain informal. So as part of our work on understanding the informal sector, we took advantage of this multi-wave survey run by RIA, the Research on ICT in Africa think tank located in South Africa. And this is an example of the difference in productivity between the formal enterprises in green and the informal enterprises. So you see, of course, a much bigger clump on the low productivity left-hand side for the informal enterprises, the red curve. But there are significant shares of informal firms that are already somewhat higher productivity and could raise their productivity significantly more if they were given technology and capability support, or if policies just facilitated the upgrading of their productivity. World Bank projects have started to explore different approaches to boost productivity. And so there's a range of policies that have to do with business plan competitions that are explicitly also allowing informal enterprises to compete. There's business skills and training and apprenticeships that explicitly are geared as well to informal enterprises. And as we heard from the employers organization, linking to markets is very important. And there are programs allowing informal enterprises to link up and learn from larger formal enterprises. I wanted to share one interesting finding based on this Research ICT Africa microenterprise survey. And what we report here is the association between the use of different kinds of technologies. These are largely digital technologies, but what this survey allows you to look at is not just whether the firms are using a 2G phone or a 3G or 4G phone, which allows them then to take advantage of learning through the internet. The blue bars are using 2G phones largely, and the green bars are using 3G or 4G phones or computers that allow them to access the internet. And so what this shows is a linkage between the use of different technologies, and on the left-hand side, it has to do with the size of the firms in terms of jobs created by these firms. And so you see that the firms, and these are micro enterprises. These firms are largely, most are self-employed without full-time workers. Most 75% of these firms are informal. They cover almost 3,000 firms across Ghana, Kenya, Mozambique, Nigeria, Senegal, South Africa, and Tanzania. And you see that it's those firms that are using more sophisticated apps like accounting software or using internet for job recruitment that are also the larger firms. And so the thrust, one of the key policy thrust that we're making in this multi-year study, which is going to come out in this flagship Technology Transformation for Jobs, is that there's a big need to make digital technologies and other technologies much more attractive to low-skilled, poor people who are largely in informal enterprises. It's not enough to take apps that are, say inventory, a simple app that would allow a small informal entrepreneur to just understand their inventory levels and their sales. And then they start thinking more strategically as an entrepreneur, as a manager. The problem is that there are very few of those apps that are simple enough for a low-skilled informal entrepreneur to use. And so the challenge is to create a business environment where digital entrepreneurs and other entrepreneurs will create the kinds of technologies that are intuitive, easy to use, and attractive for low-skilled entrepreneurs. I'm going to conclude with one last slide, which is an example of a very recent project in Senegal, which works at 3 levels of support: the firm level, the value chain level, and the national aggregate level in terms of PPP projects for investments in required complementary infrastructure. But what I want to emphasize here is that this project has a specific window explicitly for informal enterprises to acquire better technologies, acquire capabilities, that is skills. And so it's this combination of technologies and skills that will allow them, in combination with learning at the value chain level, with larger formal enterprises, which will allow these informal enterprises to boost their productivity, create better jobs for themselves, better earnings, expand. And only then, once they've started becoming more productive, larger, and generating more and better jobs, should the thought of formalization come. That is our somewhat maybe novel proposal, is that we've tried a lot on formalization. We haven't tried enough on boosting the productivity of informal enterprises. And so let's, in a complementary manner at least, try really concerted government and business support to informal enterprises in the process not requiring formalization, but helping them boost their productivity and generate better jobs, and over time create mechanisms for eventual formalization. I hope that's helpful. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Mark. That was so informative. And what's interesting about what you're saying in productivity, interesting enough, this is a common theme that we come up with through employers federations and IOE about the lack of skills and talent, apprenticeships, internships, which I used to work in prior to my position now, are so critical. But in countries like Switzerland and Germany that have very good apprenticeship programs, one of the interesting things is that many of those large companies have apprenticeships for people that are not necessarily going to work for their company, but rather in small, medium-sized companies and eventually in the informal economy. So skills, talent are critical for employers. And I would like to announce that last week, IOE just launched a partnership with Microsoft, where we are going to train some 20,000 youth in LDC countries around digital skills, and particularly trying to target those the most in need. So this is really, really critical for us, both as employers and others. So I see that there's a question that says, this sounds great, but can it work in largely illiterate populations? Mark, would you like to answer that question?
I'd be delighted. So thanks for actually being interested in some of the things I have to say and share. This actually links with the topic of digital skills. I think there's a lot of talk and good work in sort of focusing on digital skills, but most of it focuses on relatively sophisticated digital skills, like digital programming. And so Microsoft comes in and helps, in poor countries, people acquire digital skills and become digital programmers. Great. Those are not likely to be the poorest of the poor, because the poorest of the poor have, as the question alludes to, are largely illiterate. And don't have the mathematical skills for the basic digital programming. So then the question is, what kinds of digital skills do the illiterate need? And we'd like to put forward as an alternative to almost flip it and say the onus is not on the illiterate to boost their skills. The onus is on the digital entrepreneurs to build apps that are attractive and useful for the illiterate, and can allow the illiterate to learn and boost their productivity as they use the apps. So these are actually pretty sophisticated apps. They can make use of AI. They can, actually recognize variations in local language dialects. They can use touch screens, but they need to be specially designed for illiterate people, so that they actually are geared towards the productive needs of those people, so that they actually respond to their productive needs and help them learn as they use the apps, so that they may not need skills at all. I mean, an illiterate person probably doesn't need sophisticated skills to start using a pornography app. Someone will just show them, they'll learn on their own. So these productive use apps must be as simple and intuitive and attractive to use as pornography apps, so that these people can actually become more productive and learn and not have the literacy be a barrier, actually. And that's the beauty of digital applied to the needs of poor, low-skilled people. And we need a lot more of those. So we need business environments that help digital entrepreneurs create those apps profitably. And they may need initial subsidies, and they may need sometimes quite radical changes in the way we think of funding these firms. But I think that's a very exciting area for future work. Thanks for the question.
Thank you. Yes, and I would also raise the issue that I know at OECD and ILO there's a lot of research on how do you tackle this digital divide and the skills area, and gaming is becoming extremely important in trying to teach the illiterate some basic skills. But remember that there's not only what we call the hard technical skills, there's also the soft skills of trying to teach some of these people of how to work in a team and in a business environment, etc. So thank you so much for that. And I would like us to move on to Mr. Salassi. I know you've been on the line since the beginning, so thank you for your patience. So Mr. Salassi, who is the country manager for Burundi for the International Fund for Agriculture Development, is going to now speak to us. Mr. Salassi, I'd just like to ask you, assessing to finance is one of the main challenges of businesses in the informal sector, as you know. Could you please share with us a success of IFAD in helping informal businesses assessing financial support, and how can this success be replicated across Africa? So you have the floor, Mr. Salassi.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I hope I'm audible. I'm Dagmawi Hapta Salassi, as mentioned. I'm the country director for Burundi with IFAD. Maybe before we get started, for those that are not familiar with IFAD, IFAD is an IFI and a specialized agency of the UN. We've been at it for the past 40 plus years, working mostly with governments through subsidized loans and grants, with our target group being the smallholder farmers. And we've been adding new tools to our arsenal in the past few years, which includes engagement with the private sectors and SMEs. And the example I'll give you today is one of those initiatives that I've been working on. Is the Yield Uganda Investment Fund that was based in Uganda. So maybe to start, I think it's important to note that the SMEs that we've been dealing with are the innovators or the smarters that I saw from Emma's presentation. So these are people that are definitely more formal than the average informal institutions, but one thing that we've seen is that they had challenges or they had gaps to get to a level of productivity that we want to see. So that's how we engage with them. So maybe I'll start a bit with the Yield Fund, and apologies, I don't have a presentation, but so Yield Fund is an impact fund really solely based in Uganda. So it was a partnership between IFAD and the EU to put it together. We're able to attract 10 more million, so it's a 20 million euro fund. From other investors. Would also include the National Social Security Fund, which will come in at the end on how that was beneficial to them. We invest mostly in agribusinesses, SMEs, so from ticket sizes of 250,000 to 2 million. So you can see at that point what the sizes that we're looking at. And we had a whole range of different instruments for investments. And we also had a BDS facility, Business Development Support Facility, which was a cost-sharing facility funded by the EU. And that was really the key for us in addressing some of these gaps that we saw in these companies. I don't want to go into, I think a lot of colleagues have spoken before on the importance of SMEs and the digitization, how they're input for job creation and livelihoods, especially SMEs do support the most vulnerable and disadvantaged segments of the populations in general. And they play a key role in reducing poverty, inequality, and youth economic empowerment as well. So one thing that we've seen, at least through our companies, we've invested in 12 companies actually in the past 5 years for a total of about 12 million euros. And major issue that we've seen from discussing with our companies is really the costs around formalization. So the operation costs, taxes, social contribution, the fees, the compliance costs of really being formal as well when you're doing agribusinesses and trying to modernize an agribusinesses. There's costs that always come out of nowhere to some of these companies. And that was always that was a major issue that was flagged to us in terms of why not formalize, why not be, modernize your company, your agribusinesses. And to put this in perspective, I think agribusinesses, as you know, are the most informal sector at the agricultural sector in general. So it's even a bigger challenge to go in there and push some of these ideas with these companies are used to buying and selling things here and there and making a good living for the past many years doing this. So first thing that we had to do is really engage with the SMEs, part of our due diligence. And for us to be investing in a company, we do need some type of first level formalization, we can say, to have at least some audited records for the past 2 years of financing, but also some revenues of some sorts, some bank accounts. And so there's a few levels of registration of the company and all these sorts. So they're a bit higher in this game. So one thing that we wanted to do is really engage with them and make them understand what the benefits were. First is really reducing the risk of fines and closure. That's something that we've seen a lot in our sector with SMEs. You invest in SME, and next thing you know, once you clean up the books, you find out there's many arrears behind it and fines waiting for it, and it makes the investment not valuable anymore. But also, to have better accesses to financing, that's one thing that was our carrot in front of them to make sure that they come along with the journey. And the importance also is markets. I think many SMEs that were keen on moving and growing and attracting different markets or being able to sell to those, they realized they don't have the capacity. They needed some expansion, they needed some capital, some patient capital to do so, and also understood the importance of those tools to help them grow. So what we did is we had, like I said, 2 different arms. One is the financing, the other is a BDS facility. With the financing, we had a menu of different tools that we can do for financing. We had much cheaper options than what was in the market. We could do equity, we did a lot of mezz financing, some instruments, linking it to performance, linking it to KPIs, so your interest rates will vary depending on your performances around key performance indicators. So that was something that was very attractive to companies in general, to be able to get that type of financing. And to put in perspective, in Uganda, if you go to a bank, you're looking, especially in informal business, you're paying over close to 30% a year. You need a collateral about 120%, which most of these SMEs don't have. So they're usually left out of formal financing options in general. So this cheaper financing was a great tool to bring them along. And then we had this BDS support. So the BDS was a cost sharing facility where we hired professional services to help SMEs in key areas that we saw as gaps. So those include a lot of the times of finance. We put somebody to go in there and clean up the books, and something that we've seen, as you know, in the continent, companies will have 2 or 3 different books. One for the taxman, one for the investors, and one for the day-to-day. And those books will have everything from school fees being paid on that to family trips somewhere, including paying supplier A, B, and C. So even for us as a risk mitigation measure, because we're there to also get some returns for our investment, this was a key area that we wanted to. So we usually put a CFO or somebody attached to a CFO to be able to help clean up that, look at the tax arrears, clean that up. And so we have a proper look into what the company situation is, and also what are the steps to really get it towards compliance, at least to the local laws. We also spend a lot of money supporting compliances with health and safety requirements, environmental requirements. These are something that we finance. So we finance those at 85%. So we give more of an incentive for ESG related activities. If it's something related to marketing or the other activities, it'll be 50-50. But for ESG related activity, we give a bit more of a subsidy towards that. Registration of staff. We were keen on getting staff registered, linked to the National Social Security Fund. So that's a major benefit that the NSSF, our investor, got is they got a whole number of different employees registered in their fund. Yeah, and also with smallholder farmers, as I mentioned, the key of us were smallholder farmers. So registration, formalization, smallholder farmers, which was also very important for the smallholder farmers themselves to be able to get some financing from different institutions. So they're able to use those contracts and engagements to be able to attract some financing. And we did a lot in digitization of systems, accounting, supply, and also corporate governance, put a board which most of these institutions did not have, to put in checks and balances and also accountability along that. And the results were quite good. I think the perceived risk was reduced when you have a modern type of institution or company that comes in. They're able to attract really new markets. We're able to improve efficiencies, but also, get additional financing from other financiers, including banks or government facilities, thanks to that. So I'll stop it here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Selassie. And that was a great sort of summary, important points that you're raising, which actually help us to move into our next speaker and our final speaker, Fatima Coulibaly, who is the head of group product and receivables at EcoBank. So we're delighted to have you here. You're our last speaker. So we really are excited, but we have a limited amount of time. So I'm just going to introduce you very quickly and ask the question. You know that tax avoidance and evasion is widespread, mainly in the informal sector. Effective tax revenue mobilization, as mentioned by our other speakers, is important for sustained economic growth. So how can financial institutions, in your opinion, in Africa support governments in mobilizing domestic resources such as taxes? Fatima, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Shea. I hope you can all hear me. Good morning and afternoon, everyone. I would like to start by thanking the International Organization of Employees for having us for this important webinar on the formalization of enterprises in Africa. From my institution perspective, our main market remains Africa, and we definitely have that vision to support government or African on this transformation to sustain the economic growth. Now, informal sector, to be easy, is the part of the economy that is not tracked, right, monitored or taxed by a government entity. And the simplest example I want to give is that hard-working woman selling plantain or mango at the border of the road. Now, how will you even ask that business owner to pay tax when she has not been included in a formal environment? So integrating the informal economy into the formal sector is an important policy challenge for all African countries. And as a direct impact, as previously said by my colleague, on the country GDP, investors' decision, country sustainable growth, and of course, the revenue mobilization, which is really important for the country. Now, how can financial institutions like us support government, collect domestic resources such as taxes and plenty other? I think the first part of my response is to support directly government with their digital transformation, with all those e-gov initiatives we can see across the continent. So when we talk about revenue collection, we talk about identification or tracking of such tax first. And a few years ago, just to be able to identify and declare your tax, the experience was painful, long, and not as efficient as we want it to be. And that's for majority of the African market, especially for remote areas entities. So that hard working woman I was talking about selling plantain would have to let her business go to the government branch, maybe identify herself if she's registered as an enterprise, declare the tax, and then when required now, come on a monthly basis to pay for that tax. So we understand that the process, either from the government side or for the pay of tax side, was not efficient. It was manual, bringing a lot of reconciliation issues. Government will have to manually track who has paid, when as that tax has been paid, where the tax has been paid, why for. So more and more countries are now investing in technology, in innovation, partnering with fintechs and technology key stakeholders like Microsoft. We have a partnership with them to build software or system that are able to automate and digitalize that process. First, to improve the identification side by creating a database. We talk about digital identity. Without that, we are not even able to track the tax for payment to be done. So all those companies need to be in that database where we can identify them, register them, reconcile. And the good example, I think Ms. Ofori talked about it, is what we have done in Ghana. Through the ID card, now we have a tax reference attached to it, where government can now track automatically all those taxpayers. But now this is where, as a financial institution, we came into the game, because now for the payment to be done as well, we need to provide payment solution, adapted payment solution, so that hardworking women selling plantain can pay without coming to a branch or letting a business, using phones, internet, laptops, USSD. And as an example, maybe today, we are covering 34 countries for EcoBank. And we are fully integrated with 25 countries where we collect tax, like Burundi, like Guinea-Bissau, Kenya, Ghana, Nigeria, South Sudan. And when we talk about integration, is all those payment solutions we deploy for the payer of the tax to easily pay the government using mobile money, using internet banking, using really adapted and easy way to pay the government. And most importantly, instantly collect for the government, notify them real time, no manual reconciliation. The government knows who has paid instantly, when, how, why the payment of tax has been done for. All those information are shared. So that is, I think, the first part. Quickly to touch the second part as well, which I think is really important, is the impact we have directly on the informal sector. Because today as a financial institution, we need to offer as well innovative products or solutions directly to those informal business. We are not able today to track. If as a financial institution, we are able to adapt our payment method, collection method, and to facilitate and improve the businesses of those informal sector companies. I come back to my hard worker woman selling plantain. If I go to her and tell her, see, that there is this tourist that is coming to pay plantain, but he doesn't have cash. If you take that POS, he will be able to pay you with card. Or if you have a mobile money solution, you are not losing business. Your revenue will be more efficient. She will adhere to that system. And that is why it's interesting, because we are including her into a formal environment, because she's now banked to use the services and now included on the financial services. So we are able to give visibility, transparency as well to government. And even from a financial institution perspective, I think Mr. Tons talked about it, no access for those companies to a lot of services. Now that we are able to track them, we are able to give them loans, financing, investment solution, all those tools we are talking about. A good example maybe I want to take is today within EcoBank, we have what we call Express Point. It's some of the SMEs today we are taking and giving them financial service they can actually add and sell to their own people. So it can be a merchant, a gas station, any of those stakeholder. When actually they are able to provide financial services to a third party, like withdraw money, cash money, we pay them. So we efficiently improve their revenue. So they're interesting to have that solution to be offered to population. But now they need to register themselves. And today we have 115,000 SMEs that are actually using those services. And they all needed to register themselves. The other good example I want to give for that second part is what we call the EcoBank Elevate program. We know that, I think Mr. Dust talked about it, 90% of the SMEs account for about 90% of all businesses in Africa. And women own about 25.9% of it. And they do not have access to a lot of service to help them. And I think it's Mr. Wale that talked about it. We need to organize them. Either she's selling fish in the market or tomato or opening a salon. That program is designed really to help them with their business, to actually provide them trainings from financial service area, tool them with payment collection solution, give them investment solution. And those 25.9% of women that are business owners are now in a financial service or sector as well. So I know we don't have a lot of time, but to conclude, yes, financial institutions play a key role to support government for revenue mobilization, for a sustained economic growth, but as well a key actor on this ecosystem we are talking about by deploying innovative, adapted product and solution to foster those the formalization of enterprises in Africa.
Thank you so much, Fatima. And between you and Mr. Selassie, now we've gotten the other side of all this and how we try to bring this together. So it was a fabulous conversation, but I'm going to give the floor to Andrea, who is going to try to give some, summarize and give us some concluding remarks. Andrea, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Shay, and a very special thank you to all our panelists. It has been an extremely rich discussion, and I think it's worthwhile really to share the recording of it widely, because a lot of good ideas have been brought up, expertise has been shared. So what we definitely can say is that employers' organizations have an important role to play in paving the way to formalization by providing essential support in the early days of the formalization of an informal business. And particularly so when business support centers run by government are absent. But we also learned that mentoring programs are super important, whether they are from donor or funds, whether they come from employers' organizations. I think they really can provide the support to have a better access to finance, better access to markets. They also can apply risk mitigation measures that are equally important, and they really can make the transition and help in multiple ways. So the overall improvement of effectiveness of government is equally a very important factor when we talk about the formalization. And the example of Ghana has shown digitalization is an asset. It's e-governance. It's also the creation of national ID programs that allows, as Fatima just mentioned, that allows to identify taxpayers. And it's the e-banking possibilities which come along with it. And this has also been, in a way, being the key argument of Mark from the World Bank. ICT can make a difference, particularly also when it comes to job creation and when it is paired with capacity building opportunities. So ICT, as we also learned in banking, allows for this kind of integration of informal enterprises, and it can be the kind of first step then to the broader picture of formalizing those entrepreneurs. So once again, thank you very much to all of you for sharing your time, for sharing your expertise and experiences with us. It has been a pleasure to discuss with you, and I wish all of you a good day and hope to see you soon.
Thank you, Andrea, and thank you to all the speakers. I'd just like to remind you that we will be sending out the recording and also the report to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.